All right, welcome back to Prestige Motorsports. Today we're going to talk about this bad to the bone Hemi. So a couple of things we're going to cover is, first of all, way up top here, this big and ugly, that's actually what it's called. We'll touch base on the progressive linkage. We're going to touch base on why we run harmonic balancers. We'll touch base on wiring and what we got going on there. And then we'll maybe touch a little bit on, horsepower output and pricing. So first off, I guess I'll just start at the top. Obviously, this thing's it's mean looking, and a couple of things. I guess we'll start with the power is, when you see something like this, it just screams nasty. It looks like, 2,000 horsepower capable. And depending on what you're doing, obviously it's possible. I only highlight this is because we get this a lot before any of you want to make any comments of how much power this produced and how much money it costs. Please bear in mind, we design this per what the customer's request is. Not everything has to be put on kill mode. So we'll put it that way. This is more a novelty piece, a show piece that definitely still packs a good punch. So that being said, up top, the big and ugly, you'll notice this is a progressive. So we drive on this first blade, which helps us transition in the throttle. So obviously, as it starts to open the primary blade, then the secondaries will slowly open afterwards until it's just bad to the bone, ready to fry tires. So we do this based on drivability for the customer. And obviously it's got a wicked look to it as well. So that's kind of what's going on with the big and ugly. As I work my way down, we'll touch base on the wiring. All right. So what we're using is the Holley HP. We use a lot of the Terminators, HPs, and Dominators. In this situation, it's not a race car, but it's an aggressive street car. So we use the HP, and you'll see there's an injector plate underneath the big and ugly that's going to keep the blower cool and lubricated. And then we have another 8 injectors down in the manifold. So basically it's a 16 injector system. And I'm pointing this out because we have to modify the wiring harness, or we start with a wiring harness that is unterminated. So that way we can route it really clean, route it where it needs to go, and then terminate it as appropriate. Now the neat thing about that is up here, I'm not going to get into all the nomenclature of how the electronics control this so much, but the injectors up top are going to batch fire. So it basically, will batch one side and then the other side. Up here it really doesn't matter because we're flooding the blower with some fuel, and then we have the 8 down in each individual port, which are controlled independently with this dual sync distributor. It allows us to individually trim each hole if needed. So that helps with idle quality, drivability, and then keeping air-fuel ratios consistent for every cylinder. All right, so down at the bottom here, it's kind of hidden. You can't really see it. We're big advocates of the Innovators West billet aluminum balancers. I prefer on blown applications to still run a harmonic dampener. Sometimes that poses its own difficulty as far as adapting the pulleys. As you see, we run a serpentine system over a V-belt. So there's a little bit of work to be done down there in some cases. But the harmonic balancer is going to provide a dampening for the crankshaft vibrations and that sort of thing. When you run just a crank hub, which lots of people do, they are relying on the belt to absorb any of that energy, which, to each their own on that. We'll allow this to absorb some energy, but we're still going to run a harmonic dampener to save that crankshaft. I think that's a big attribute to some of the stuff we do, especially these old school Roots blowers. All right, so now this is obviously what you guys are waiting for, is let's talk about power and price. All right, so first of all, power-wise, on pump gas, this is going to be a pump gas application. So we're not trying to, again, put it on kill mode, lean on it extremely hard. So 900, a little over 900 on pump gas, at a minimal, like 5 pounds of boost, which I think it was 5% overdriven. So like next to no boost, make 900, which the base engine's 700 typically. So with low compression, camshaft change, you could call it say 650 to 700. So we've made 2 to 250 more horsepower with 6 pounds of boost. That's pretty impressive, really. You know, again, this isn't a 1500, 2000 horsepower motor. What we did do is when we put it on C16, we put it on good gas just to keep it safe during testing. And the pulley stack that we ended up with, surprisingly, went from 5 or 6% overdrive to 18%, which honestly isn't a tremendous amount, but we only picked up 2 pounds of boost. But we picked up another 100 horsepower. So the goal was 1,000. That's what the customer wanted. We achieved it very easily at, again, a very low boost level, like 8, maybe 8.5 pounds if I'm not mistaken. So for those of you that are going to look at this, understand that, yeah, it's not a cheap engine, okay, well, it should make more power. Well, we could get way more aggressive on the valve train or camshaft. We could certainly spin the blower harder, and although this one's intercooled, a lot of them aren't. So the thing you run into is this blower, it's more of a heat pump. They're kind of inefficient. They're bad to the bone looking, but they're inefficient, so they create heat. You know, we have to cool that air charge down. So really, if a guy was looking for 1,500 horsepower, we need, I call it throwing the cog to it, we need to be 30% or better overdriven to make a larger boost number, and really, it probably should be on alcohol or E85. That's how you can get this big old nasty combination to really make some steam. But again, that's not what this was about. All right, the last thing is price. I don't have exactly what this cost. I know that it's a little over, definitely over 40. And there's a lot of facets to that. So, you know, we pride ourselves in the most complete combination. So what's that really mean? Well, from fuel line crossovers to the wiring we spoke about, there's time involved to, you know, build unterminated harnesses, to loom it and tie it back extremely nice. You'll see at the back of the engine, we've made brackets for, you know, the map sensor, and we've got Adele clamps to hold the looming to keep it nice and tidy. So more or less the customer can take this and plunk it right in the car, hook up the wiring, and rock and roll. Alternators hung, any balancer spacing or pulley spacings, all been machined and finished. This is a drop-in ready, call it a crate engine, because it's going to come in a box. You know, so, but it's personalized, and it's tailored to that customer's vehicle and their wants and needs. So when we talk about price, it's not just some of the core components that we're talking about here. It's the extra, you know, added fittings and time and detail. Even getting these things onto the engine dyno is its own, you know, task in itself. You know, you've got to have a sling and a forklift typically, depending on how you're set up, just to get it on the dyno. You know, so all the wiring, all the time to set it on the dyno. Then we actually spend time to tune these things correctly. That way you don't have this daunting deal in the car to really spend all this time tuning. There's just some minor tweaks and changes, and you're ready to go down the road. So, you know, again, it's not just power and price. There's so much more to it. And hopefully, you know, with more and more videos we do about that people really truly start to understand that. So if you're in the market for something wild like this, certainly give us a call. We go through, we'll spec everything out for you, give you a detailed estimate, and then if we're ready to rock and roll, let us build your next dream.